Guys, thank you so much for joining me today. Today I got Matt Morse, an excellent human being, and it looks like we got a special guest, Micah, over here. Say hi.
Micah, the star of the show. Can you say hi, Micah? Can you say hi? Maybe next time.
Maybe next time. Hopefully we'll get Micah on the podcast soon. Well,
One day, Micah will make an appearance.
Awesome. Well, dude, thank you so much for joining. Guys, if you don't know Matt Morse, he is a successful entrepreneur. He's a man that I respect, that I've been working with for a couple of years now, and he's a fairly new dad. And Matt, dude, thank you for joining. One question I start off with everyone is, how many kids do you have? What's their name?
You just saw him, Micah. He's the only one. He's a year and 4 months now, so fairly new, but learning more and more every day.
Dude, he's ready for college already.
Might as well be headed off.
Well, tell me, what is your happiest moment so far as a dad?
Happiest moment as a dad. I think, there's been a lot in a short year and just a little bit over a year. But I would say the first is probably when my wife found out that she was pregnant, and we have a little routine of like making the bed, and so she put a couple books about being a dad underneath the sheets, and we would make the bed, and I saw the books there, and we had been trying for a year and a half almost, and it wasn't easy. So we were just praying that it would be possible, and so that would probably be number one, is just that initial moment of finding out. And then a close second to that is probably when Micah was born, and the first moment that you see your son and he looks you in the eye, and you realize that you're responsible for that human being. I have friends that have kids, and I've been around, not a lot, I think relatively, I haven't spent a ton of time with babies in particular, but I do have some friends that have kids, and you play with them here and there, and then after 30 minutes they're gone and off to their parents, and you're not responsible for them. But that moment, I think that you realize that you're the human being they're depending on for their well-being and their quality of life, and everything kind of changes. And I know it kind of sounds cliche, but it one day at a time, it continues to set in, and you realize, and you adjust, and you adapt, and you do everything that you can. And I think it's a journey that's not one that you can really prepare for, regardless of what you hear or what you read or who you learn from. But you just once it hits you, you got to figure it out along the way. And I'm thankful that my wife you should be interviewing my wife on a mom's podcast, because she's the real MVP around here, and nice. Keeps everything rolling. And so without her, obviously, things would be different. But to answer your question, it would be probably the moment that we found out that she was pregnant, and then when Micah was born right behind that.
I love that. And you tapped into something interesting, like you guys were trying for a year. And I know for my sister and my brother-in-law, like they were trying for a while too. And just for anyone out there, like what was that experience like?
Yeah, we were married for 3.5 years or so before we really started, and which was great, to spend time together, and we traveled and we did all the things, and then it kind of 1 month leads to another, and then it's been 6 months, and then it's been 9 months, and it can be frustrating for sure. I'm more of a positive, enthusiastic, optimistic type. So for me, it was like, okay, we'll keep going. But it started to wear on my wife, Rachel, who, for a lot of her life has been a high achiever. She said she has a vision, and she knows what she wants, and she goes and gets it. And that's why we're married, obviously. No, I'm just kidding. But it was one of those things where, there's a lot of variables out of your control. And we started to look into getting tested for X, Y, and Z, or finding out what maybe we need to do differently to give ourselves a better chance. And, it's crazy to think about, but in all honesty, it really seems like one of those situations where the harder you try, the harder it gets. And after it was a year and over a year, all of that kind of frustration or, curiosity, like it kind of builds up, and then you don't give up, but you stop thinking about it constantly. And then all of a sudden, boom, like it's magic. And so, yeah, we did some things and tried some different methods to make it more likely. But I don't know that any of those really made a difference, as much as it was like, okay, let's stop stressing about it, trying so hard, and all of these things. And the body is an amazing thing, as evidenced by the whole process of becoming a dad. Is something, I don't know, I think something just kind of allows the body to work more naturally. And but speaking to the person who, everybody's in a different journey, right, along this process, whether it's been a year or it's been 5 years, or maybe it's not possible at all. I've always been a strong believer that everything happens at the right time, exactly when it's supposed to happen. Good, bad, ugly, everything happens exactly when it's supposed to happen. And I believe that's what happened here. There was a for those that are struggling, I think it's perseverance. It's, yes, do your research, do your homework, find out, the realities of the situation. But I guess my one piece of advice is sometimes when you try so hard to make something happen, it actually gets harder along the way. And just thankful to be here, that Mike is here, and that it worked out. And I think it also makes it a little more special than maybe it would have been that it worked on the first try, right? Like, there's a reason for everything that happens. And maybe that was to increase the level of appreciation that we have, and understanding that it's not always our way or our plans that are how things are going to go. And all that to say is Micah showed up on the day that he was supposed to show up.
It's interesting that, again, like you said, everyone's got a different part of the journey, or someone experiences maybe the same thing in a different way each time. But there's something interesting that you said too, like you and your wife, like knowing you, like, look, there's a focus on how to win and how to create what you want to create. And I'm curious, like, what were some of the things that you focused on during this process, during this experience with you and your wife?
Understanding that it's everything's going to happen exactly when it's supposed to happen, whether we like it or we don't, or it's the way that I envisioned it or not. That is a lesson that I think is applicable to all areas of life, and certainly something that the more you experience it and the more you live it, the easier it is to have that perspective. Yeah. But that was really the main thing. Just understanding that this month or next year or never, everything's going to happen exactly when it's supposed to happen.
I love that, man. And tell me, if you could go back in time, what would you do the same?
What would I do the same? Everything.
What would you do differently?
In terms of leading up to being a dad, or Micah being born, or since?
Anything. What would you do different? If you could go back in time, what would you do different as a dad?
I think it's being present, being in the moment, and leading up to it. I was really thinking that, and in the moment you're trying to remind yourself that, but it goes so fast that and I could probably learn a lot more from the other guests that you'll have on the show who've been dads for a lot longer, but even the first year and a half or just about a year and a half, it goes so fast. Yeah. And just being in the moment and being where your feet are and enjoying each step of the way. A lot of people will say, oh, wait till he can crawl, or wait till he can walk, or wait till he can talk, and your life's going to change dramatically at each step of the way. And I understand what they mean by that. But at the same time, we just tried to maintain a perspective of let's enjoy the time that he can't crawl, that he can crawl. Now that he's walking, let's enjoy the time that we can't, he's not pronouncing sentences yet.
Yeah.
So let's enjoy the process and everything that it is to be. And so in terms of what would I do differently or next time around, I would just make that more of a focus, right? Like it's one thing to have it in your mind. It's another thing to really be doing it. And I like to think that I do it as much as I can and do my best with it. But it's certainly easier said than done to be in the moment. And I've had a lot of great mentors and people that I've talked to. And I love what you're doing here, by the way. Just one of my overall philosophies in life is when you set out to learn something or you want to develop a skill, is finding people who have done what you want to do or are doing what you want to be doing, and ask them questions and talk to them and, get inside of their mind and learn what I would call inexpensive experience versus expensive experience, going through it yourself. And so while you may not be able to prepare for being a dad, you can certainly become more educated along the way and learning from other people's experiences. So I think that's great. But my point is that in learning from those mentors and having those voices around me leading up to and since Mike has been born, have just been invaluable. So, I think maybe do differently is just get around more new dads. I think there's a pretty significant distinction between like being the dad of a newborn or a 1-year-old and having 3 kids that are in high school.
Yeah.
Because when their kids were 1 and 2 years old, that we were living in a different world. And so just being around like-minded individuals is a generally a good idea, and something that we, that I've benefited from greatly. But, I'm not surrounded by tens of dads who have 1-year-olds or had newborns. So there's a lot of, figuring it out on your own. And personally, I rely heavily on my wife, and she's taught me more than anything, just trends and behaviors and what this means and what that means and how to do this and that. So, if you asked her the question about what would you do differently, it might be a different answer, because she's the type where, I don't know if you're familiar with the Enneagram at all, but she's a type 5 on the Enneagram, which is just kind of like a fact finder and wants to know kind of the why behind things. And I'm more of a 3, which is, yes, I can do this, you can do this, we can do this, let's go do it. And so as a Enneagram 5 or that personality type, when there's a baby crying and you don't know why, I think there's a lot of parents who want to find a way to block it out or stop it. And she's more of like, let's dig in and find out why, and not just to solve this one moment, this issue, the challenge that we face in this moment, or that the baby's experiencing, but like, how can we learn from that to be better parents and to maximize the baby's quality of life and their experience. So like, it's really been fascinating as the development from 3 months to 6 months to a year to now just over a year, how much they change and what that means for your routine, for your sleep, for your ability to be present, and when the best time of day to do that is, and how they eat. And there's just so many moving parts to that. So I think that is also something that is probably unique on a per child basis, but there's certainly like some global kind of things that we've learned along the way that have put us in a position today that we're more confident than we were yesterday. And a year from now, it's probably gonna be a lot different than it is right now, because they're in a different stage of this development. So just overall, it's fascinating. But along the lines of what to do differently, I think is, or what to do the same would be, yes, like be there, be present, look for opportunities, challenges. How do we make the most of this? How do we improve the situation? How do we not just put a Band-Aid on it? And then maybe what to do differently is just finding that group of like-minded individuals to maybe expedite that learning process. Again, I think there's a part of this that's going to be unique, but there is some resources and things that people have shared with us over the last year, that when you read that book, it's a light bulb moment. Oh, we should do that. So I guess like technically, yes, if we could have absorbed that information sooner, that could have made things a little bit easier.
I love that. And I love Tony Robbins says that I turn decades into days. And it's like discount, like that's beauty of learning from others with books and all this stuff is like, how can we learn from some other people's experiences, not just our own? And it's so fascinating to see, like, again, like even what you said, like your wife's experience is different, even how she sees the world is different, like fact finder, just in that one sense. And it's like, again, like we're partners in crime, we're here for the same thing, we're here for the same benefit. And I mean, you even mentioned, so like we spoke a little bit about that first year of, not that first year, but that year of, trying to have a baby, trying, like, ups and downs, like not knowing when it's going to happen, doing something I wanted to mention though is also the beauty of doing less or slowing down in order to go further. Like you don't have to do so many things, because sometimes that, like, you'll stress out and that the body will respond to that. I'm also curious, like, what was the first year for you guys like? Like, that's different sleep schedules. It's different for everyone. My sister and brother-in-law, they're about to finish that first year with their twins. So I'm curious, what was it like for you guys?
Yeah, so the first year started a month earlier than it was scheduled to start. My wife's water broke 5 weeks early. We went into the hospital and she had basically an emergency C-section because the baby was upside down. And so there's some variables there that are kind of unique in that, preemie, and we were on kind of a trajectory of putting some things in place to be prepared for this. And just like to my point earlier, things happen exactly when they're supposed to happen. Is okay, the due date's September 27th, but I wake up August 27th to running out the door, getting in the car to go to the hospital. And in my head, I'm going like, I got a month of other things that I had planned to do before Micah showed up, and understanding that the first couple months were going to be different. But the first couple months were different. The first 10 days were spent in the NICU because, not uncommon, he was early and had to develop lung capacity and ability to eat and all that type of stuff before they would send him home with us, because they're looking at us like, man, you guys don't know what you're doing. we can't send this baby home with you. And at the same time, we're saying like, man, we got to get out of here. That 10 days, looking back on it, was phenomenal. We learned a ton from the NICU nurses. I mean, they were incredible. In the moment, felt like 10 years. Like, are we ever going to get out of here? This is tragic, just because it didn't go as we had planned. And a large part of my wife and I's life up to the first 29 years, up until August of 2020, which is having a baby in a pandemic, is another layer to this thing that you'd probably write a book about. But largest part of our lives was, I'm going to, play a college sport, and I go play a college sport, and I'm going to start a business, and I start a bit. And it was a wake up call, the whole thing, the trying for a year and a half, the coming early, and you just learn a lot about yourself through the process of this. So to your specific question, the first 10 days of that year were spent in the NICU. We were in the hospital for the first 5 of those days. Then we had to come home without Micah. And we went back and forth, obviously, all day, every day. During that time, there was one parent at a time in the NICU. So we had to alternate. We could never see him together. And obviously there's little to no sleep through that period. But then even when we got home, it was like, okay, the baby really just, eats, goes to the bathroom and sleeps, eats, goes to the bathroom, sleeps all day long. And there's little, time that they're awake or that you can really interact. And so we went back, my wife went back and forth between breastfeeding and, trying to make that work. And then we made the decision to go to formula, which may seem like a smaller thing, but like in reality, that was kind of one of those big shifts where it's like, okay, we can stop trying so hard, knowing that it's going to be okay. And that frees you up a little bit. And then the next thing and the next thing. And so throughout these first 2 or 3 months, it was intense. It was, we're figuring it out along the way, and we want to have a routine. We want to have a sleep schedule. We want to, and so there's a component of the sleep that impacts what we do. And so the alternating, I was staying up until 5 a.m. and sleeping from 5 a.m. to noon, and alternating. So figuring that out, and how do we balance being a dad and being an entrepreneur with a lot of responsibilities and people that are depending on me. And your heart wants to be a dad, and your mind knows you got other things that the world that you've committed to doing, or that you are responsible for. And so it's a balancing act of that, and chipping away, finding time to do so, I think, was the key to keep head above water at that stage. But then once the sleep became more regular, I think it was right when we turned after the third month, which I think for most babies is after 2 months, but Micah was 5 weeks early, so it was like 3 months. That's when I started to hit my stride again with being able to sleep from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m., have some time to myself from 4 a.m. to 8 a.m., and then kind of be on and off during the day. And then I'd say about the 6-month mark, I was able to kind of really settle back in and feel like I was engaged, I was present in everything that I was doing. So the short answer to your question is the first 3 months were chaos. The next 3 months got better. And then since then, really feel like, with my wife's help, is, been huge. I work from home, and, she used to work with me, and now she's being a mom. So we're both here all the time, and just creating some of those boundaries, physical boundaries, or, schedule and routine type stuff, to be able to be here when I'm here, and then be a dad when I'm being a dad, I think is the key. So I have, segmented time throughout the day that I know I can focus on, executing what I need to be working on. And then I have time during the day that I know I'm going to be a dad. And my wife knows that she has time to breathe and to relax a little bit in that window as well. So as with that said, as structured as it has been, and how helpful the routines are, it never goes exactly to the minute, right? So it's having a framework, it's understanding this is the framework, and then being able to compensate and adjust within, in order to accomplish everything that I want to accomplish throughout the course of the day, starting with being present as a husband, being present as a dad, and as an entrepreneur, and wearing a lot of different hats. I think that's really the key. Now, for the parents, that it's a little bit unique maybe than some of the other guests that will be on the show, in the sense that I don't have a commute, and except up the stairs. And there's some time that lunch, for example, that I stay home and I get to see Micah if he's not napping. And so I really make a conscious effort to be there when he wakes up at 8 a.m., to see him at lunchtime. And then like that 4 to 8 p.m. window is where I can be dad. And so I feel really good about that. And I feel like it's not necessarily for everybody. If you have a 9 to 5 job with a hour-long commute, you get home at 6, then, it's not necessarily recommending a schedule so much for anyone as it is understanding a framework throughout the course of the week, that you can allocate the time and the energy, more so than the time, is the energy of, not just being there, but being there is two different things. And so I think that's really one of the biggest things, is that's allowed us to have a great year in 4 months, is being conscious, cognizant of that, and sticking to it to a degree, and being flexible within that.
With that schedule, that sleep schedule, and even like working from home, I know it's different. But I'm curious, like, what was it about the specific support that helped you during that time? So for, like, again, the dad who's maybe expecting soon, or maybe he's a couple days or a couple weeks in, what are some things that we could help him with, like, with regard to, like, look, this is the support that I received, and this is what really helped us.
Yeah. In what period specifically?
I would say, like, actually, great question. I would break that up in, like, what was racing through your mind when it came to, like, Micah being a preemie? Like what were the worries, the concerns that you did, and what helped you through that time really move forward with that?
Yeah, so I mean the concerns are obvious, are the obvious, like, okay, we're hoping that he's going to develop the ability to breathe and eat. The nurses and the doctors were great in the sense of assuring us that this is normal, or it's nothing too out of the ordinary for a baby that's born 5 weeks early. So trust in them was a big thing, and just making sure that my wife was on board and understand, on the same page, I think is the key, because this is a team effort, right? And I have a ton of respect and admiration for single parents, because man, it is no small taking on to
Yeah.
raise a child effectively. And as I've mentioned, my wife's been a huge part of this, but I think it's so much of a team effort that you've got to, and there's a yin and a yang, and there's different personality types. And I think it requires both, right? My personality type alone would probably not raise an elite year and 4-month-old. And my wife's maybe not either, but collectively, I think we have a nice balance, and understanding that and deploying that, and, having the ups and downs, but getting back to the middle is really, I think, a critical part of being able to maintain your energy and your focus to performing at a high level throughout all of this. So specifically to the phase in the NICU in the first 10 days was back to what I said. Everything happens exactly when it's supposed to happen, right? If he doesn't make it, tragic, but everything happens when it's supposed to happen. So in business and in life, I do a lot of pre-mortem, reverse engineering. Let's assume this doesn't work. Let's assume, this business doesn't work. Let's assume this relationship doesn't work. Let's assume the worst, the absolute crash and burn fail. Okay, now why did that happen? And how can we prevent that along the way? So it's a little bit of that mortality motivation and thinking backwards that I think most people don't really do, or they don't want to do. And I certainly don't enjoy doing it. I enjoy the clarity and the focus that results as a process, as going through that process. So once you've kind of established that, okay, let me sit in that, let me experience that. Now let's go backwards and think, okay, the odds of that happening are pretty darn slim, and we're going to make it home. And when TBD, the doctor said maybe tomorrow. They said that like 7 times. 10 days later, we were home. So, it's understanding what's going on and listening and caring and being involved. And ultimately, like, trusting the doctor would be the big part of that first phase. Because if they said, like, man, your baby's not going to make it, that would be a lot different 10 days.
Yeah.
But the fact that they were, this is no problem. We're going to make it. And when he's ready to go and we feel confident, then, that is the way to do it. So then we get home, and I think the next phase of that is really about, kind of like I alluded to, it's being present, and it's understanding that, a lot of these things, these phases that the baby's going through, the phases that you're experiencing as a dad, they're temporary, right? I know I'm not going to sleep from 5 a.m. to noon every day for the rest of my life. And so I understand that that's going to happen for maybe 4 to 6 weeks, or maybe a little bit longer, because of, Micah being a preemie and whatever. So it's just a big picture thinking, understanding the vision of what's coming. And, he's going to grow, he's going to get big, he's going to get strong, he's going to, and it's the same thing today, right? It's, there's times that aren't perfect, and there's times that the routine doesn't go as scheduled or as planned. And but I'm thinking of Micah as an 18-year-old going to college, and how can I best prepare him for that? And not trying to prepare the path, the cliche, but prepare the child for the path, because you can't control the path and all the variables and uncontrollables that are coming over the next 17 years of his life. But what you can control is the focus, the time, the energy, the love, and the care and the support that you provide to him today and tomorrow and beyond that. So I think that's kind of, to your question, my thought process around it. And again, my wife has learned so much of the tactical schedule, feeding, sleeping, and the consistency is just huge. Because of the consistency now, sleeping through the night, 13 hours a night, napping almost religiously from the same time to the same time every day, having great energy, very healthy, all those things. And obviously we're very thankful for that. But again, it's one of those balancing acts of, I've got a longer term vision and a different approach that would not suffice by itself.
Mm-hmm. It's so cool to like hear that, like that present day thinking, like, look, this is temporary, or even like long-term thinking, like, look, this is not like, it's not like, let's not get into the moment, let's not get overwhelmed, like this is not forever. And I think that that's a powerful skill that many of us can do better with cultivating, just because, again, like you do, how you do anything is how you do everything, and how you do anything could really apply to any other area of your life.
Yeah, and that's the same thing as lessons I've learned from growing up, from being an athlete, from being an entrepreneur, is spin-offs of those lessons are very applicable to being a dad. And I think a lot of dads would probably say the same thing, on top of the way that you were raised and the way that your parents demonstrated, and the experiences that you had with them. And so that's a huge part of it, is my parents were amazing, and they empowered me and they equipped me to pursue what I wanted to pursue and be passionate about the things I wanted to be passionate about. And so that's, I just hope to be a percentage of that for Micah. And, you try to implement that in the way that you parent, paired with, like I said, the experiences and the lessons learned on the field or in the trenches of life and business once you leave your parents. So collectively, depending on when you became a dad, I think there's a balance of packaging what you've been raised, how you've been raised by your parents, with the experiences that you've had after you left your parents.
I love that. And it's even with the men and women that I coach, it's like, look, how have you succeeded in other, I know we're working towards this goal, and I know we're stressed and we're feeling kind of overwhelmed, but can you think of a time where you didn't feel that way towards a goal that you worked towards, and how you accomplished that? And I think it's very easy, like we're in the midst of things, sometimes we forget the resourcefulness that we have. Because again, it's like you said, it's like, even like with my mom, she was a single mom, and just incredible how she was able to raise me and my sister all pretty much on her own. She, like, we had my aunt and two cousins there, but it was like my mom kept to herself, and she dug in, did the work. And it's like, how did you do that? And it's like, that's kind of like how I've done everything else. But oftentimes, again, we tend to forget where we have won, and how we can use those lessons and what we did there, like the habits and routines that we have there, and how can we apply it here. It's just a different game, different field, I guess.
The first thing that comes to mind is like just showing up every day. I mean, I like to take pride in the fact that I show up every day, regardless of the arena, whether it's being a dad, or it's a business, or it's a family or a relationship, or and I think a lot of that comes back to the fact that my parents showed up for me every day. My dad was a fireman, so he worked one of every 3 days, and my mom was a paramedic until I was 2 or 3 years old, and was the same schedule. So when I was really young, they would there would be like I would be with only my dad on one day and only my mom on one day, and then both on a day. But they never had any traditional, corporate job after I was born that was like 9 to 5, both of my parents are gone type of thing. And so there was a lot of presence, like in a great way. And then even when I went to school, rather than going to the local public school, I went to a private school that was about 40-minute drive from my house, starting in preschool. And they drove me to and from school every day until I was, a sophomore in high school. And on top of the investment of being in a private school financially, which you don't really comprehend until later in life. But
Yeah.
the time, not just that they invested in driving the car from A to B, but in talking about life and sports and the news and what's happening in the world. And just, I think looking back on it, it was like, that was some quality time, an hour and a half every day until I was a sophomore in high school, that I had one-on-one with one of my parents, and it alternated, it wasn't the same one every day. And they had the flexibility to do that. And on top of that note of showing up every day, it was like when I got into high school and I was playing football on Friday nights and my dad's shift fell on a Friday, he would take the day off of work to be able to show up for that football game. When I got to college, and he retired after my third year of college, I believe, the first 3 years, I can't tell you how many drives they made from Chicago to Birmingham, about 11-hour drive on a Friday morning to arrive for the Friday night game. And then how many times they would turn around on Sunday afternoon and drive 11 hours back home to see a weekend series of college baseball. Again, in the moment, it's like, this is cool. My parents are here. Not everybody's parents get to watch them play. Heck, I didn't even play all the time, and they were there. But looking back on it, man, it's just like, it's crazy. And so my point within all of that is showing up every day, but not just showing up. I mean, like showing up and being there. And if I can get a moment, I like to talk about time in the sense of moments. People talk about having good days and bad days, but I think it's more so you have good moments and you have challenging moments and you have amazing moments and you have sad moments. Like I don't like to think that a moment dictates or defines my day. And in the same way, showing up every day, well, you could technically show up at 6 a.m. and then you could cash it in at 7 and be lazy or do this or do that, or, get into things you shouldn't be getting into or whatever. So it's more so like showing up in this moment, like being present for this interview right now. Or when I leave here and I go to play basketball with Micah, being there and playing basketball with Micah, not just sitting there and standing by, showing up in that moment for him, I think is the best gift that anyone can give. So more so than, I guess, showing up every day, it's like showing up in this moment and making that conscious decision over and over and over. When I hear Micah waking up tomorrow morning, it's like, okay, breathe deep and I'm going to show up in this moment, right? I'm not going to be able to wake my son up every day for the rest of his life. So I better enjoy and be present and engaged in the moment today, because what's the alternative, right? Standing on the sidelines and watching the whole thing go by. I choose to be on the field and be engaged and be invested, and therefore hopefully creating more magical moments and magical memories and experiences that will outweigh anything else that you could accomplish or have or be in life.
Dude, I love that. Now I want to respect your time. So I got this one question that I've been burning to ask is, what was that like? You growing up, you had like some days you like pretty much it was just one parent a day. And then you had that drive. Like, what was that like growing up? Did you feel, like, oh man, I wish I saw my parents more? Did you feel complete with the time because you had that quality time? Like, tell me more about that.
Yeah, well, my mom retired when I was like 3, I believe. So from 4 years old on, my mom was there every day, and my dad was there 2 out of every 3 days. So I don't recall a lot of the 1 to 3-year-old. I do vaguely remember getting transferred from one car to another when they were getting to the fire station and changing shifts, but that was really, really early. So basically the way that I would say is like, my mom was present nearly 100% of the time from 4 years old on. And my dad was present 2/3 of the time for my whole, life up through until I went to college.
And what did that mean to you? Like, again, like, for me, this podcast is also like, it's not just for the dad. It's also for the dads who are like working and they're like, oh man, I got to work and I got to provide. And maybe that's why I'm not there with my kid too much. And what I've learned after, I don't even know how many I've done so far. Time is the biggest thing. Kid doesn't really matter how much money you make. It matters how much time you spend with them. Like, what did that mean for you, like growing up that way? How did that shape you?
when I was
How did you feel
growing
to see
up,
your dad?
yeah, when I was growing up, it was less top of mind, or I didn't understand how unique it was. I
Mhm.
knew my friends had parents that were gone and they were working and they would work in and they were working. And um, it was unique. It was a unique situation that I have realized with time um, has hopefully helped to shape and mold me in a very positive way that it can't necessarily be replicated, right? Unless your parents happen to be working every third day on as a fireman, and
Mhm.
it's unique in that sense. Um, but yeah, I mean, it was great. The time and the presence, um, I think, created a lot of experiences and opportunities that they sacrifice so much of driving here and paying for travel
Mhm.
baseball and doing all of these things that I think the short answer to your question is, in the moment you appreciate it, and then 10 years later or 15 years later, it's pretty, I mean, it's hard to really comprehend and to wrap your head around, and just thankful, gratitude. And
Mhm.
I hope that gratitude is what inspires me to be the best that I can be. And not just time, but what is in that time.
Yes.
What is the energy and the focus and the presence of that time? I could go spend a minute being next to Micah scrolling my phone on the couch, and
Mhm.
that's not really going to create magic and a memory that we're going to remember forever. But I could also put my phone away and engage and interact in a way that hopefully makes a positive difference.
No, I love them. That to me, like for a man listening to this right now who's like, look, I don't have the time. I got to provide for my family, or I'm working maybe multiple jobs. And it's like, look, like the timing does not have to be perfect. It could be imperfect time, but it's what do you do with that time? And just knowing you and just like like just how you carry yourself is like, wow, this guy seems pretty complete.
I'm trying to do the best that I can. There are a
Mhm.
lot of flaws, don't get me wrong, but it's just a daily pursuit of how can I show up at
Yeah.
my best today and be better than yesterday. And there are so many things about being a dad that I'll tune into your podcast to be able to learn from other dads, because there's not a ton of resources like that out there, right? I think this is
Yeah.
awesome. And there are so many things that I don't know, that I screw up, that I do. It's just like a constant journey of learning and getting better, just like life is. Whatever walk of life, whatever arena, whatever industry you're in, is consistently getting better. And so, to your point on the time, you may not have all the time in the world. It may be you're going for work before the baby wakes up or the kid wakes up, and you're getting home right when they're going to sleep, type of thing. And
Mhm.
so I think in that, if it's 15 or 30 minutes a day, how amazing can you make those 15 or 30 minutes? How can you make those 15 or 30 minutes 10 times more fun and more engaging than they are otherwise? And just working that process of
Mhm.
trying to figure out, that's what I try to do, is learn from people that are performing at a high level and that have multiple kids, that have raised, multiple kids, because there's just so much to learn from the dad who has, like I referenced earlier, let's say 3 kids in college, as a dad of a 1-year-old, that you can't really get. I mean, other than the way that your parents raised you, the examples that they were, and
Mhm.
talking to them and getting feedback from them, or in-laws or whatever. Like, there's not a whole lot of other places that you can go to ask specific questions or get specific answers to raising children. And again,
Mhm.
it's like that plus, that experience, which they raised kids in a different decade, if they're at that age, packaged with, like, let's find a group of new dads, of recently new dads or whatever, and just collaborate, brainstorm, complain,
Yeah.
appreciate, all those things. And being in that environment and around that type of energy, I think is it gives you the best chance to be the best dad that you can be.
I love that. And this question is not for me, not for any other dad out there. This question is for you with regard to what is something that you want to tell Micah
Today or in the future?
anytime. What is something that you want him to know?
First of all, I love him. I would hope that he knows that by the way that we, tell him every day, even if he may not comprehend, the way that we've raised him and taken care of him. More specifically, I would say at the age of, being able to comprehend it, I would say, back to the line of you can't really control the path. You can't prepare the path because there's 1,000 different paths that may be.
Mhm.
But by becoming the best version of yourself, you're going to be most equipped for whichever path that you choose, and all things are possible. And we live in a day and age that is drastically different than when you and I were his age. And, imagine 30 years from now, what the possibilities will be like, the world that he'll be living in. Hopefully it's a great one. And I would just say that all things are possible. Go for it. Fail fast, make mistakes, and learn from them. And surround yourself with great people that have, I like the coaches in my parents and the coaches that I've been around in the last 30 years of my life have taught me infinitely more than anything else that I've really been able to read or watch, or just that real life personal interaction experience, and working and winning and losing together and all that type of stuff is, I think, invaluable. So Micah I would tell him to, try to be around the best people that you can be, the best coaches, play for the best coaches, work with the best mentors, do internships with a variety of different companies or industries or things that are outside the box to find out what you're good at and what the world needs. And at the end of the day, man, it's like, as long as he knows that I love him, he can, depend on me as long as he possibly can for anything. And that, just open and transparency, communication, I think, is key in some situations where I see breakdowns in parent and child relationships. I think it's almost, you could probably confirm or deny this, but it's almost always like a breakdown in communication, right? If we can communicate at a high level, openly, transparently, I mean, so many things are going to be seemingly irrelevant in this life. And there's a small percentage of things that matter. And I'll close with this because I just remembered somebody asked me this a couple of weeks ago. They're expecting a child soon. And they said, what have you learned? And how has your life changed since since Micah was born? Similar to the questions you answered. But what I came out in the moment, I didn't really, think about it too much, but what I said was something that I never really thought about before, which, how that happens is, you're pulling it out. And what I said was that 99% of things in life don't really matter. And 1% matter infinitely. And we spend so much of our time worried about these 99% of things that don't matter. Like, dude, in 70, 80 years, you and I are probably not going to be here. And we spend so much time on these trivial things that if we shift that time and that energy that we have available, which is finite, to the 1% of things that matter. And don't ask me like what makes up the 99 and the 1%, because it's just arbitrary numbers. But the 1% of things that matter, like your family, your relationships, and if we shift that time and energy into those things and connecting with people on a deep level, to the point where we can establish real connection and make a real impact, then, everything else kind of falls into place. And it's when we get off track, when we're focused so much on this 99% of things that are relevant or are relatively insignificant. And when we come out of that and it ends, like all things are temporary, whether it's a day or it's a month or a year later, in looking back on that, so much time and energy is wasted on this that, could have been addressed head on or communicated differently or whatever, that would have freed up more of this time and energy to focus on the things that do matter. And so I think, that may be another thing that I would say to Micah, to your question, when he can understand it. And just through life is easier said than done again, but understanding the things that matter, that you're passionate about, that the world needs, that are relevant to, your path and how you can make the biggest impact in the lives of others, is what matters. Is how can you be used as a vehicle to make a positive difference in the life of others? I mean, that's what we are. That we're vehicles that generation after generation, how can we improve the quality of other people's lives? How can we make a real difference? Not superficial, not transactional, but if we focus on that, then tactically, like what you actually do is far less important than understanding that conceptually and philosophically. And I guess it'd be like, part of my mission, it would be to, what can I learn from Micah? First of all, I've learned a lot from him already. And how can I impart that on him in a way that he takes it and makes it even better, more effective, and passes that on for generations beyond that? Because at the end of the day, it's a small, finite window of time that we have to really raise, a child and have a significant influence on their lives, call it 18 years, relative to the next, I don't know if I have a year or 70 years left, but if it's 60 years left, I have only 1/3 of that time with Micah and then 2/3 without him. Right. So understanding that and prioritizing that and acting accordingly, I think, is the key.
Matt, thank you so much, man.
Thank you.
You got a lot of wisdom there, and I'm excited to have you on here in the future when Mike is older, and who knows if there's a sibling there involved, and see what your experience is there too. Thank you so much for your time, brother.
Yeah, you got it, man. This is great. I love what you're doing, and I can't wait to tune into the other episodes and hear the other guests that you have.
Definitely. Thank you, man.